project manager at Business Sweden in Paris. I work with, we have a team of 10 here, 10 business development consultants who work with the Swedish companies, helping them to do business in France. We work with companies of all sizes and types, from family companies to startups to large MNCs who are already present here. So there's really quite a wide range. I've lived in France for almost 9 years now, so there is some personal experience to the content of our slides here as well. So we will be talking a little about France. This presentation is meant to give you sort of an overview of what are the trade relationships between Sweden and France. What is France known for? What are they good at? What is the current status of the global pandemic in France? And how do we do business with the French? So I'll just jump right in. So France is the world's 6th largest economy. It's the 2nd largest economy in the EU. These numbers are ever changing. So someone might say it's number 7 or number 5, but I think what the most important thing to bring with you from this slide is that France is really a very important world economy. It has 67 million inhabitants and it's a very important trading partner to Sweden. It's actually our 9th biggest trading partner, both in terms of imports and exports. Last year we exported about 6 billion euros of worth to France. There are about 600 Swedish companies who have local establishment here in France, and of course many more who have presence through distributors or who sell directly from their Swedish operations and so on. So it's a very important market. It's also a key player in the European economy in other respects, such as it's actually Europe's leading destination for foreign direct investment. It has the highest number of large companies in Europe, meaning that 40 companies on the Forbes 500 list are French. Paris is also a city that has a very high concentration of head offices for multinational corporations, and many foreign companies use France as a stepping stone into Africa and the Middle East. So just for reference a little bit, because we know that France is a much larger market population-wise and economy-wise than Sweden. But if we compare just the Paris region, Île-de-France, with Sweden, we see that there is even the Paris region is a lot larger than all of Sweden. Just to give you some perspective here. So what is the elevator pitch for France? Why is France interesting aside for its sheer size and importance in the global economy? France has the largest aviation industry in Europe and the largest nuclear industry in Europe, actually. It has the 2nd largest food industry and chemical industry. And it's actually the ICT sector is both large and rapidly growing. It's home to Paris, of course, which is the world's 2nd most visited city. If you launch retail products in Paris, you will have unparalleled exposure, of course, for new products and trends. And Paris is also becoming a very important, even almost the most important financial center actually in Europe, following Brexit. It's also home to the world's biggest startup campus, Station F, which I'm sure that many of you who are listening in are aware of. And like I mentioned before, it's home to many of the Fortune 500 corporations. France is a very centralized country. A lot of the decision making is being done in Paris. It's not as regional as Spain or Germany, for example. So it is very concentrated to Paris. That said, one should not underestimate the importance of all of the clusters that are to be found in France. We have, of course, a very important aerospace cluster in Toulouse, surrounding Airbus, for example. We also have a mobility cluster outside of Lyon and Grenoble. We have Cara that we have collaborated with on several locations, actually. So just this image is supposed to show you that, I mean, of course, Paris is very important and is the center in many aspects, but there are so many, France is so much larger than just Paris. So moving on to the politics, because it's, of course, very important when you're looking at the country. We have, since 2017, the president is Emmanuel Macron. It's a president who is, his critics will say neither left nor right, and depending on who you're listening to, he's described as the right wing, and there's someone in the right wing might describe him as left wing. But he was at the source of the new movement En Marche that actually reorganized the political landscape in France. He's very inspired by the Nordic economic model, looking at tax reforms and government spending. And he also promotes a very European-friendly policy in general. He promotes strong cooperation with other European member states, and sort of focuses on the importance of working together in order to address global challenges. So an open-minded leader. Since July, because there have been some reshuffles in the government. It's pretty common. I don't think it's ever happened, or it rarely happens, that a president has an unchanged government throughout the whole term. We are currently in our third government, which was the reshuffle was made in July, and it's headed up by Prime Minister Jean Castex, who was actually in charge of the deconfinement this spring. We will get back to these issues. Of course, it's very hard to speak about France without touching upon that, but just to give you some background. So Macron's term has been quite influenced by reforms. There was, for example, a large labor market reform that was made. It's basically now it's a lot more flexible to employ in France, which has simplified for many employers, of course. There's also been a deregulation of liberal professions in order to open up new structures in the market. And Macron is also very focusing on tech and startups. We went very large. His platform before the election was basically France as a startup nation. Some of the things that his ambitions were that to create 25 French unicorns before 2025, and there have been many initiatives in order to support this. I don't know if you see that in his presidential pictures that's on the slide, next to his right hand are two iPhones stacked on each other, and this is on purpose. So this is the official presidential picture, and this is on purpose to show how he is sort of tech-friendly and forward-looking and so on. So it's an interesting detail, but it's a lot of symbolism in it. So he started talking about how how it is. How France is focusing more on being, we're trying to be a good environment for startups. Like I mentioned, Paris is home to the world's biggest startup campus, which is called Station F, which was founded in partnership, public-private partnership with one of France's star entrepreneurs, Xavier Niel. There have been a lot of focus on R&D tax incentives and cutting corporate tax rates on R&D operations in order to stimulate that. And there's a lot. Paris is a leading financial marketplace in the Eurozone, and there's a lot of activity on the stock market. And there are some public initiatives and some public institutions that are working to help startups. We have not only startups, but to promote startups and business in general. BP France, which is a public investment bank. They're financing by loans and investments certain companies and certain operations, and they're often involved in collaborative projects with other countries. So, for example, BPI France are working together with Vinnova on some calls for tender and on many other projects. So this is a very important actor for you to know. And then there are all other initiatives. There's, for example, we have Business France who are working a lot with this as well. These are just Choose Paris region is an interesting example as well, because they're working as a catalyst for business and innovation, which is supposed to support international companies who are willing to come and invest in Paris and establish themselves here. They're working with dedicated with startup sourcing missions and so on. So there's a lot of activity going on there as well. So you should feel free to reach out to me if you want us to put you in contact with anyone here, or to see how we can help you create these relationships. I think what's important to keep in mind here is that there is a lot of support and a lot of willingness to attract startups and to attract also international companies, international startups to France and to Paris. So moving on, we actually Business Sweden, in collaboration with the local chambers of commerce, conducted a global business climate survey this year. This is something that we do every year, and France was part of this, very much so part of this survey. Basically, what we do is we interview Swedish subsidiaries all over the world, and then we basically compare the results. So what we can say is that Swedish subsidiaries are overall very satisfied with the local conditions in France, despite this being a very turbulent year. I'm not only talking about Corona, but before COVID-19, we also had some strikes, and we have the Yellow Vest movement that was also disruptive, two disruptive factors. So besides this, Swedish subsidiaries are satisfied with their conditions in France. Comparing to the global results, France is one of the countries where Swedish companies are the most satisfied. And one of the categories where France is really standing out compared to Western Europe, for example, is the physical infrastructure. It's a lot higher here than it is in other Western European countries. I mean, the results, the company's impression of it, of course. Other factors that have been shown to be very appreciated are the access to distributors and suppliers, and also personal safety. They get very high scores. Where France scores a little bit lower, we can see in digitization, market regulation, and corporate tax, which is incidentally three of the focus areas of the government. So we'll see what happens, but these issues are being addressed at the moment. So this is something we will see how it will develop. For the French, have a very positive view of Sweden. Sweden is strongly associated with high quality, innovation, sustainability, and we've had a pretty stable reputation for a very long time. So there is a high degree of trust placed in the Nordic countries in general, I would say. So focusing a little bit more on the actual trade relationships between Sweden and France, there's a slightly positive trade balance from Sweden. We're exporting mainly machinery and vehicles to France, and we're importing pretty much the same things. Like I mentioned, France is Sweden's 9th biggest trading partner, both in terms of import and export. And we have, well, you can see the numbers here. Looking at the companies who are present in France, I mentioned that there are 600 Swedish companies established. This selection is not necessarily all subsidiaries. This is more to give you an understanding of which companies are present here in one way or another. The main sectors, if we should be so bold as to select some, are security, healthcare, mobility, food and consumer product, and infrastructure. This is also where we work a lot, where we have a lot of ongoing missions with Swedish companies. And like I mentioned, there is a very close tie and close collaboration between Sweden and France. The relationship is good and has been good for a very long time. And actually, it's been enforced. In 2017, Prime Minister Löfven and President Macron signed a French-Swedish innovation partnership in order to increase collaboration in areas that are judged as very important. So the aim of this partnership is to increase collaboration in order to stimulate innovation in areas that are crucial for a sustainable transition of the economy. It's focusing on clean energy and a climate resilient economy, green solutions for transport and smart cities, as well as health and life sciences innovation. It's very important. It was very important in 2017, even more so now, I dare say. And then, of course, digital transformation, which sort of it's everywhere. It's very important in all sectors. So this is actually something that we use as a platform in order to stimulate collaboration between Swedish companies and Swedish other academia and French counterparties. So we've actually carried out a number of activities in the framework of this partnership, for example, within healthcare and mobility and energy. So I'll be happy to, if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to share more with you at your convenience. So as we all know, I think France is being hardly hit, as all European countries, by the COVID-19 situation. We're currently suffering the second wave, and the estimations are that the economy will shrink by about 10%. Those are the predictions. So it changes a little bit, but that is the estimated GDP fall. Unemployment is also expected to rise, of course, and well, these graphs are not very encouraging, but as you may be aware, we are currently in our second lockdown. We're a week in, I would say, and hopefully we will see these numbers stabilizing a little bit next week once we've seen sort of the effect of the lockdown. What is different now, though, because the first lockdown that we had in March and April was very, I mean, it was a full-on lockdown. Schools were closed, everything was closed. That, of course, took a very hard toll on the economy. So this time the aim is to keep a higher level of economic activity going, partially by keeping schools open. So the schools are actually open. You're allowed to drop off your kids and pick them up and so on. Most people, I mean, it's encouraged that you work from home if you can. So there's definitely a large drop in the number using the subway, for example. So it's not as the same. It's not as strict as it was this spring, but of course, I mean, all of the restaurants are closed. All of the retail sector is very, very badly hit. Of course, I mean, the only open stores basically are food stores. So it's but it's a lighter lockdown than last time. I mean, even before the second lockdown and the second wave, there was a relaunch package launched. This is actually, I mean, it's a relaunch package that's focusing basically on the same sectors as the French-Swedish innovation partnership, energy, healthcare, transportation. So the idea here is of course to stimulate the economy in order to give it a kickstart after this crisis, but also by sort of giving it a push in the right direction, focusing on sectors and types of businesses that will be crucial in the transition of the economy as well, that it will be necessary. So going into how to do business in France, and I would really like to stress that this is something that's based on personal experiences, myself, my colleagues, and so on. I think it can give some good insights, but of course, I mean, you need to adapt to every situation, and people are increasingly international and so on. So this is a little bit extreme. So when we write the typical Swedes and the typical French, I mean, you should take it with a pinch of salt, of course. But there are some issues that are really different. For example, whereas the typical Swede is used to a non-hierarchical culture and management, the French are tainted by a very hierarchical culture and management. In France, it's very important to have the top management on board in order to have a decision made. There might be long lead times to process key decision makers, for example, whereas in Sweden, I mean, it is more important to get the subordinates on board, but everyone should be on board before making a decision, right? And it's not as difficult to get a hold of key decision makers. So whereas we are focusing a lot in Sweden on consensus and making sure that everyone's on board, France is more top-down decision making. Used to the top-down decision making. In Sweden, for example, when there have been cases, for example, where there's been misunderstandings between the Swedish side and the French side, because the Swedish side is, the Swedish side is perceived as taking a very long time to decide. It's coming across as undecisive and unclear, whereas in France, the top management will make the decision, and then the implementation process will be longer. So you have that's where you have the differences. So it's very, I think that's something that's very important to be aware of, and it's something that we see every day, basically, the differences here. Whereas Swedes tend to avoid conflict, the French are very, I mean, they love to discuss and argue. It's really part of the culture. It's also, I mean, in the private life, it's something that's it's important to be able to argue your point. I mean, even if you go to a dinner and you're discussing something where everyone's agreeing, it's not unlikely that someone's just gonna change their point of view or change their maybe to change their side just to get a discussion going. And this is actually, I mean, I think this is very important to know, because this is not necessarily the way that it is in Sweden. Whereas Swedes are early adapters, French tend to be more conservative, but Swedes are still group-minded, and French are still curious to try innovation. So there's some nuance there, of course. The working days are different. In Sweden, we have, I mean, the longer days are longer generally. In France, I mean, they start a little later. Maybe you start at 9:30, but you will probably not leave before 8. But there you usually have a few breaks, and the lunch break tends to be a little longer, and so on. So we probably work about the same amount of hours, I would say. So if you're going to a meeting with a French potential partner or investor or client or what be it, there are some things to think about. Basically, tying back to what I said in the previous slide, sorry. So make sure that you verify that the person that you're going to speak to is the decision maker. Verify the hierarchical position, and make sure that you are well prepared, and not, it sounds a little obvious, but make sure that you prepare your arguments, even your rhetoric, if you can, actually, especially if you're doing it in French. I don't know if you will be, but you should be prepared for a discussion. You should also know that a negotiation criteria, and this is something that's relevant more for discussions with potential clients, of course, are long credit terms, might be longer than in Sweden. So, and this is this is a criteria for negotiation. You should plan for additional time. There might be lunch following, for example, so you shouldn't get your flight, book your flight for just after the meeting. During the meeting, it's very important that you arrive on time, of course, but don't be early. And if you have to be early, don't be more than 5 minutes early. It's considered quite rude to be too early. So make sure that you're not. Show engagement, and don't take criticism personally. So it's it goes back to what we said about the will to argue and to discuss. I mean, it's not you should not take it personally. It's just the way that interactions go. A no is not necessarily a no. Make sure that you find new angles, new ways of arguing, and so on. And be sure that to show and take position, and to ask a lot of questions, for example, and be persistent. I mean, all of this means that there's an interest. Don't be upset if you get interrupted, for example, and don't be scared to interrupt. This is not necessarily, I mean, within reason, of course, but don't be. It's very important to understand that this is not a sign of disinterest. It's actually the opposite. If you manage to get your counterpart is interested in what you're saying, they will, discuss and react often interrupt, then you're on a very good streak. This is very important, I think, to keep in mind. And then afterwards, it's extremely important that you follow up and you stay persistent. They might, I mean, if you might agree that your counterparty is going to get back to you in a certain amount of days, well, you still have to remind them. You cannot just wait for them to get back to you. And if you don't hear back from them, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. It's just, we expect that. I mean, it's expected that you follow up, basically. And networking is really, really key here. So keeping the relationship going even after the meeting. Also, there's definitely an importance of formalities, formal attire, maybe not as punctuality is not as strict as in Sweden, but it's still, longer delays definitely have to be communicated. It's definitely very important. If you're speaking in French, it's very important that you use vous. Regardless of the language that you're using, it's very important that you're using the academic titles, for example, and madame or monsieur last name. So don't start with hey François, for example. It's better to go with Monsieur Dupont. Generally, discussions are held in French. We often help out here. In many of the meetings that I, for example, participate in, the French counterpart usually speaks French, and we help out interpreting. And then the Swedish representative usually speaks English. So if the Swedish representative speaks English, it's often understood, but many times the French counterparty will prefer to reply in French, especially if it's a negotiation or about something a little bit more complex. This, of course, varies vastly. In the startup sector, of course, it's much more international and it will be different. But if you're dealing with, for example, a large company, a representative from a large company, you cannot expect people to speak English. I think that's the important thing to take with you. All right. Like I mentioned, so I work for Business Sweden, and we support Swedish companies in their international market expansion. I work mainly in France, but I also manage projects across the globe, basically. We provide services in basically to help out to go to market, to find new sales channels or set up sales channels. We help you do your product and customer mix analysis. We also do some M&A work. We do a lot of B2G strategy, public affairs, and so on, stakeholder management. And we also provide, it's very important part of our services as well, is the back office services, where we basically help Swedish companies with everything that's administrative, payroll, hiring, and so on. So we're basically, we can help you when you decide to come to France. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emma. I just realized that I am very French. When my friends are very early to like a dinner, then I think they are very rude. So
yeah, I've started to become that way as well.
But this was it was really a great presentation. I have one question for you. When starting off your business in France, of course, you need to have some first paying customers and so forth. But when you reach that, what is your recommendation? Should you, as a startup, should you employ? At what stage should you employ a French colleague instead, doing the groundwork?
Well, I guess it's basically it's very difficult question to answer. Depends on your business and so on. But some basic rules would be, of course, does your business require a formal establishment in France? Are you selling, for example, to institutional or public players, for example? Then it might absolutely be advised to have a French company. That's the first thing, and then of course French employees would be the second step, right? But that's one thing. Is there a signaling value to your customers that you are present, properly present in France? Yes, if there is, then it's something that you should do pretty quickly, I would say. Then, of course, then also depends on the complexity of your product. On what kind of relationship you have with potential distributors and so on. Is this something that can be, or should be distributed by a local distributor? Is it something, for example, that's being distributed to a very fragmented market? Then you might need to have a distributor in place who has sort of all of the has a bigger organization in order to reach all of these clients. Then keeping a distributor might be a better option for a longer time, because you might need a sort of certain muscle in terms of sales organizations, for example. So it really depends. If you, however, have a more complex product, or you need to have a higher control of the sales process or the after sales process, then I would suggest that you probably keep it in-house, because then you have better visibility. If it's a low volume product, for example, but a very long sales cycle, it could definitely be preferable to have it in-house. So not a quick answer, of course.
No, but a great answer. That's a super great answer. But I was also thinking regarding the language. If you really want to, if it's a rather complex product and you need to be connected to a lot of different stakeholders within the customer's environment, of course, that would be difficult if you don't have the language, I guess.
Yes, you definitely have to have the language. I would say in almost every sector you would need to have the language.
That's good, and that's great. Well, now in just a couple of days almost, there will be a lot of startups having meetings with large French companies. And it's B2B meetings, so it's the majority is B2B startups within AI, very different application areas, of course.
Right.
But and these meetings, they are quite short, but all the meetings are tailored. So the corporate will have chosen the startup beforehand and have read about them and so on. So it's you could say that the primary work with getting through the call and book this meeting, that's already done, and there is an interest.
Right.
But the meeting anyway, it's 20 minutes, and if you as a startup feel like, wow, this was a really great meeting, we have some opportunity here, what would be your suggested follow-up then? How persistent should you be? When is the Frenchman feeling that you're chasing instead of, that this is still a nice relation?
I would say that the threshold for that is a lot higher, or the tolerance for that is a lot higher, or however you would like to see it. It's you can be much more persistent than you think. I mean, I'm not saying that you should send emails every 2 days and call them 10 times a day. That's not, of course, what we're saying. But don't. I mean, if you agree, first of all, in the meeting, if you try to agree on a time when you're supposed to follow up, and then you respect that time. First, if you say in a week or in a month or whatever is the delay, I would probably suggest that you respect that timeline first, and then if you don't hear back, I would pick up the phone. I mean, you start maybe by sending a mail, and then I would pick up the phone if I haven't heard back from the mail in a couple of days max, and maybe relaunch of the mail in a week later. I mean, don't be. Of course, I'm not trying to convince you to be to be too insistent, but please don't take lack of answer as a lack of interest, because it's not it.
Oh, that's a really good advice, and thank you. As a Swedish person, you always feel a little bit more humble, and it
Yes.
might be difficult to perceive this, but it's a huge variety depending on the culture. So it's very good to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely be more. Don't try not to be too humble.
Yeah, good. Okay, yeah. Thank you very much. Well, thank you so much, Emma, for a great session. And this is, as I said, recorded and will be watched over YouTube and in our matchmaking portal of all the startups that will have meetings with French large companies very soon. So very valuable. Do you have any other questions?
No, I think I don't know. Do you have any? I don't know. Was there any questions from the audience?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, well, great. But feel free that if you have any more questions, if you're listening to this or watching this at a later time, please feel free to reach out, and we'll answer any questions that you might have then whenever you see this.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Emma.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Have a continuous great day, and take care.
You too. You too. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.